owning a business with entry-level skilled employees has its own challenges. See, there's not enough recognition for that type of business. Yes, we hear about fast-growing startups and highly skilled individuals, but we need to talk about this type of business, the one where it's a lower-paying job and lower skills are required. See, as a business owner, our job is to help all of our team members to grow and to rise up inside the organization. That's what this conversation is about today with Shelby Scarbrough. She's an author of the book Civility Rules. She's also been a business owner owning several restaurants, and she's on a number of different boards and organizations and truly making a massive impact. She has a new book coming out, which is focusing on the right things that will help us navigate our circumstances as a country or as countries throughout the world are struggling to find lower skilled employees and have them rise to the occasion. This is such an incredible episode. And I think for you as a business owner, if you're trying to help inspire that team to rise, if you're trying to attract great talent, or if you're going through and you're really struggling to make that impact inside of your community with the company that you have, this is a must listen to episode.
Shelby Joy Scarbrough, and I'm an entrepreneur with various interests and passions in lots of different industries, from civility to joy to entrepreneurship, and the sky's the limit.
Hey, Shelby, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you.
You know, we got connected through a mutual friend, and what's wonderful is that there's a lot of information on the internet about you. That makes it easy for our researchers to dig in and find out who you are. And we found a lot of great things. So our conversation today is going to be different than other episodes we've done. We're going to be helping business owners in a new paradigm. So I'll frame that up real quick. Because Shelby has experience in a lot of different industries and roles, she's been able to go through and work with top leaders in maybe quote unquote hostile situations. And she's worked in the trenches in lower skilled or lower paying jobs and inspired them to move up the ranks. And in our country and countries throughout the world, we're having challenges with lower skilled paying jobs getting fulfilled. There's a lot of vacancies, people not wanting to work. And there's companies that are, having pressures from inflation and supply chain. And so we want to help business owners solve that problem today. Sound like a plan, Shelby?
It sounds great. Okay.
So if you wouldn't mind giving a background about, first, you had a series, a large group of Burger King franchises, and you helped grow those, but that was operated by in lower skilled, lower paying jobs. And just to preface the language to our listeners, that doesn't mean that they're less than or not as good. It just means that that was the stage of their career at that time. So can you kind of set the stage and let's work up from there?
Sure. I also think it's important to think about the business model itself. So we were franchisees for Burger King. My parents started out as franchisees when I was about 14 years old. And it's still true today that you can work your family a lot harder and longer than you can work at any other employees. So I was there, sweeping floors and at 14 and helping get the restaurant opened because, babysitters were hard to find. So we would sleep in the I was going to say the benches or the pews, but the seats inside the dining room when my parents were finishing up work and going home before the restaurants even opened. And then once they were up and running, we did every job. My sisters and I took on every single job in the restaurants at one time or another. That was everything from cleaning the bathrooms to taking orders to expediting orders to making Whoppers, not all at the same time, of course, but over a period of time, and doing the management training so that we knew how to run the business. It was a very important part of my base framework and development as a human being. So to set that stage, does that help a little bit, the context?
It does. That really helps. And was the landscape different, like what we're seeing now in America? And again, I'm just stating that what we see in America may be an example of what's happening in Europe, because we have listeners everywhere. Was it as challenging then to get employees as it is now?
No, in fact, we were sort of the popular place to get a job, and it was the fun place. One of the places that I would think that people look now, if you're a West Coast of the U.S. person, you might know In-N-Out. In-N-Out has lines of people for hire that want to be hired, and it's a very popular place for young kids to be hired. And so I think if we look at that and say, why are some of the other franchises not as successful in that? We can look at it through a few lenses. One, you can always look at it through money, but that's not the only way to solve something. I don't even know what In-N-Out pays, but it's a matter of saying, okay, the model has such slim margins. For example, these kind of businesses, so not just fast food, but all small businesses have relatively slim margins for the most part. So the model was built on lower paid labor, but meaning it to be entry level, not careers for people. So the model itself has a challenge in adapting to a different kind of workforce that makes it their career, because they may not have an education that allows them, or a language skill that allows them to go into a different kind of job. So this becomes an anchor for them. I have to say proudly that my parents, and we've sold the restaurants since, and I had restaurants in Virginia with my husband at the time and still business partner. We had people who worked for us from the beginning to the end. And my parents were restaurateurs for almost 40 years. So to have somebody who started at 15 or 16 years old and ended their career with us, or still with the people who purchased the restaurants, is amazing. So there is longevity in this industry if you want it, and if you are passionate about it, but it's really meant to be a first step.
And you mentioned that longevity. I would imagine, I'm making the assumption that they started at the bottom, near the bottom, and then as time went on, they kept on rising their skill set, the opportunities that they had, which made them become managers or whatever else that would be. Is that correct?
That's correct. They worked their way up. We rarely hired a manager, if maybe at the very beginning, but once we had our farm team, so to speak, I don't know that we ever hired a manager from the outside, and they all grew within the company. And so that was a very important part of our work ethos and a management style and expectation, is that we would find people who would want to stick with us and grow with us. It's a much maligned business for a lot of different reasons. And I just think that, there are too few people now who have actually worked in one and understand what the mission is of as an employer of that. Obviously, the mission of the business is to make money and to therefore be able to grow. We grew each restaurant one by one, using the profits from one to fund the next, so that we could grow. And so we absolutely increased the employment base in the region and the opportunities for entry level through management jobs. That they don't seem to be appreciated as much anymore, and I'm not sure why, but I can speculate on a couple of levels.
Yeah. So actually that's the perfect next point. So I'm going to refer back to your book, which ties in to this next question. In your book, you talk a lot about personal responsibility. I'm making the assumption that that's why we're having problems right now, because people are not being responsible. We've had this culture in society for a while where people are getting participation trophies and people are being coddled, and they're not actually having to deal with difficult things. I would love to hear from you why you're seeing the difference of what we had in the past of of anticipating that it was a first steps job versus now people being disgruntled because they're not, getting paid what they should and everything else. So what are your assumptions there?
So it's a complex, society's gotten much more complex than when we started the business, started in the business, I should say. And there's a lot more choices out there. There's a lot of other ways to make money, you think, but so that's why there's many reasons why there's a lot of job openings right now. One, COVID was a challenge as well, because these kinds of jobs you need to be there. You can't do them remotely. That's the one thing that's not really possible with these jobs. So when you think about what has to happen to encourage people to want to be in the job market, there's two sides to the coin on this. One is the management attitude and their outlook and their way they approach employing people. And the other is the employee themselves. And I think we're seeing a divergence there. The expectations of the employee are higher. Whether that's right or not is a whole nother debate. But if you try to solve for that, I think one of the things is beyond money, which is a fundamental issue for everybody on both sides of that equation, the inability to pay a lot more because there's very little margins in that industry, and a lot more a lot more taxes, a lot more overhead, a lot higher costs. So you can only charge so much for a hamburger. It comes out from profits. So every penny you pay an employee more is there's no money to continue the business and you pay your taxes out of profit. So it's a fascinating way we do business here. But then you have the employees who come to it with a slightly different attitude these days of expectations. And so if people came to the table with mutual respect for one another, and the employer and employee, building a level of trust and dignity is a very big part of this. So I'm speaking the terminology that comes from my book, as you mentioned, called Civility Rules. And it's about bringing a purposeful practice of civility to the world. But that means the personal responsibility of it lies within the individual to take ownership of their lives. And I think that's a big part that there seems to be a trend in employees coming into the workforce that is about entitlement and what can be done for them rather than what they can give to what they're doing. And the more you give, the more you get, essentially, is the old phrase that works really well. I still believe in it, because the harder you work and the more you give your job, the better you'll get and the more opportunities you'll get, whether that's within the organization you're in or an ability to transfer that skill elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it follows the law of increase, what we're seeing out there. And what's interesting is there are a lot of different, business experts out there, strategists, consultants, and they will focus on different tactics. But what I've noticed from your book and then the next book that you have coming out is that you've approached it differently. You're taking this approach of gratitude and joy, and you're, instead of focusing on the things that are negative and trying to shape how that future model looks like, you're looking at it and saying, well, here are the good things, here are the characteristics, the skills, the positive pieces, and you're shifting it there and almost letting like that invisible nature ride its course. Is that a safe assumption?
Yeah, there's an esprit de corps that goes on in the workforce and in the offices that have the best culture, or the businesses and the restaurants, et cetera, that have a good culture within them, a culture of camaraderie and fun, but responsibility to the organization and to one another and to themselves to bring their best self to the table every day. Those are the ones that you see really thriving. And so that goes to the joy part. My next book is about joy, and that my middle name is Joy. So there's a little story that goes with that as to what, but I decided to own that part of my being and incorporate that into everything I do, and everything I say, and the way I look at the world is a glass half full. I mean, I'm not Pollyanna about things. I know there's challenges in the world. There are big challenges in every facet of the world. Everybody's got something going on in their own lives that they're dealing with, et cetera. But coming to the table with an attitude of gratitude, an outlook of joy, finding the joy in the journey makes all the difference from the individual perspective. You can almost do any job if you come to the world looking through that lens.
I would love to do this and actually, practice as an exercise at the moment, because I want, you have the microphone, and to kind of set this question up, we have listeners throughout the world. And listeners send us emails. They let us know what's going on in their businesses, the challenges that they have, how they're trying to grow their businesses, or how they're really flourishing. And often, I'm seeing pattern over and over. Hey, I'm trying to find great support, great, help. I want to grow this business or acquire another one. So I'd love to turn that microphone to you and in a way for you to kind of picture this group of people and say, here, I want to help you. I want to impart some wisdom.
Sure. I would say if you have a company values, if you work towards company values, I would encourage perhaps considering the concepts of joy and civility being part of your company values. Those are only words that if you just go with that, but you can embody those in every single thing that you do in your business. Rewarding people, having an environment. I'm not talking about foosball and those kinds of things, that this .com era was so famous for and is still famous for. I do think that those are healthy things to have outlets for people and ways to get up and move around, and that there's more strategy to that than just playing a game and having it be like a fraternity party, but it's more about bringing this aspect of everything you do, bringing joy to your life, bringing joy to your work, and helping your employees, challenging them to find that joy in everything they do, asking them how they're doing, not being afraid to talk about feelings. One of the things that we grew up with, or at least my era grew up with, was, talking about feelings is not business-like. So I think that there's an opportunity there to learn about our own feelings as managers, as owners, as business people, and being able to communicate to our employees and with our employees about how we're feeling about something. Right now, it's a challenging time. Being open and honest, and instead of stone-faced, telling them, I'm having challenges too. I'm trying to work through this. Leaders need to show a teeny bit of vulnerability. Weakness is different than vulnerability, and the vulnerability gives your employees access into your heart and lets them feel that they're connected to you in some way because they have feelings too. So using those feeling words to talk through some difficult issues is a great way to start to get to the root of some of the issues within your business and how you can solve for them.
Yeah, that's really impactful. I think that, again, you mentioned the foosball. It's a little bit blown out of proportion how the .com has gone, and yes, feelings, vulnerability, adding in these pieces. I want to say if we had a time machine and we rolled back the clock of you starting your businesses now, but in this era, how would you be approaching it differently?
Wow, that's a huge question. Starting it now. Well, I think first of all, we got to look at the balance of the workforce and say, what is it that we can do. Unfortunately, that the trend is going to be towards robotics wherever possible and using AI and things to fill jobs. So people who are waiting for that perfect job may just miss the mark because their jobs are going to be filled by automation. That takes all the vulnerability, all of the emotion out of it, and you don't have to deal with people. So I think realizing that if you want to work with other people and get out there in the workforce, or if you want to have employees and want to build the employee base, we've got to understand how to work with one another, and that's where civility comes into play, because the concepts of trust, respect, empathy, courtesy, and manners falls with under courtesy. So how does an employee show courtesy to their management team and the customers? Going through exercises that can really get to the root of all of those values, I think will enhance and deepen the loyalty to an organization and within an organization, and the purpose of that, why they're there. Why are we here as a company? What's our purpose overall? It is to make money. Companies make money. I recognize I'm a capitalist. On the other hand, we are in a new era of a generation of people who see the social value that we've never incorporated into businesses until the last decade or so. And so recognizing that and owning that and finding ways to have each employee feel purposeful in their role, whether it's an order taker at a fast food restaurant or a senior executive within your company. It is possible that they need to feel needed and to know that what they're doing has a point to it.
I agree with almost
Sure.
all of that. I'm going to push back in one piece, which is yes, they do need to feel needed. But over the past decade, things have flipped, and I think it's gone the wrong way, which is people are getting identity in their work. And that absolutely shouldn't happen. A business's purpose is to make money, period. If you don't make money, you can't be in business. You can't help others. And so we're on the same page there. The other challenge is this social and the societal pieces of, and there's a lot of things that are politically correct and said versus what actually happens in the background. Could be backdoor pieces or whatever that may be, where they're saying one thing, but they're actually doing another. And that's a challenge to us as business owners that run off of ethics and are helping people. And that's really difficult. There's a lot of companies in that way. And so I think, our audience, it's a lot of small to medium-sized business owners. And we've, seen anywhere from just starting out to people that are in, the 9-figure range. So we're not, giant venture funded, which is for the most part, that's kind of drunk business. And so
I've never heard that phrase, and I agree with it.
It really does feel like that, doesn't it?
How fast can we spend somebody else's money?
Yeah. And it's like our healthcare. When you're operating in a way where you're detached from the end result, you're not operating the way you should. And I kind of want to wrap up with you helping our listeners understand why it is that these core foundational values, your book talks about Washington and our country and what we were founded upon. It's definitely not popular right now, but it's what's going to be needed to change.
Yeah, I'm on the board of an organization called the Freedoms Foundation at Valley Forge. And when the CEO, David Harmer, called me and asked me if I would consider being on the board, I thought, I have too many things going on. I don't know if I can do this. But then I really looked into the core root of what they do. And for 75 years, they've been teaching the Constitution and the founding documents to high school students and to high school teachers, believing that high school teachers are multipliers because you can teach one high school student, but every teacher teaches multiple students. To educate people, reintroduce people at this point to our founding documents and what we are as a country. And if we're talking about globally, even global entrepreneurs, there's some foundational wording in our documents that would be good for us to review even as business owners and see how we can think about those and how we can incorporate some of those ideals and concepts into our own businesses. And for employees coming into the workforce to think about it, again, it goes back to personal responsibility. We're endowed with certain inalienable rights, but on the other hand, that we're not supposed to be given everything. And so hard work is a concept that this country was built on. And some people suffered more than others by that concept. And we need to honor that always and continue that tradition. So I'm a little general here, but we do workshops kind of so that we can help employers and employees understand the values of civility and how to incorporate those into their lives and into their work, into their personal lives, so that it's a holistic approach. It's not just a transaction. It's a relationship-based approach to building strong relationships and an outlook of optimism.
What a breath of fresh air, especially right now. So, thank you for sharing that. How can our listeners say thank you to you and follow up?
Thank you. I can be reached at shelbyscarbrough.com. And if they want to take a look at my Joy website that I just launched, that's a few kind of products and things around the concept of joy. It's joyjourney.life. And I'd love to hear from anybody who wants to take this journey of personal responsibility and making the world a better place.
Wonderful. Shelby, thank you for taking the time to share this message with all of our listeners today.
My pleasure. Great to speak to you.